Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin, and this represents the culmination, the final video that I'll be filming on the runes from a larger perspective, from what I call a cosmological level, looking at the runes within their aett and within the Elder Futhark script as an entirety, and looking at how they represent to you and to me essentially a pathway of learning how to progress towards a level of oneness that all pagans, in my opinion, should always try and strive to attain. Whether you're consciously aware of it or not, if you are a pagan, you will be trying to achieve greatness. You will be trying to achieve, the very best that you can out of life. You want to succeed, you want to progress not only yourself but others, and that whole process is mapped in the runes. You only have to look at the runes and kind of ponder over them. I don't like the word meditation, but you ponder on them, or you meditate on them, or you go into a trance over them, whatever, but you focus on them, and by doing so you can get the secrets from the runes on how to achieve oneness, the path that one must take, the logical path that one must take to achieve this ultimate state of integration with life itself. And that's why it's so important, because if you can follow this spiritual path essentially that the runes spell out to us, because don't forget, the runes come from the very beginning of the universe, from the birth of the universe itself, and so mapped within that birth of such a of all realities, not just the material universe but all the spiritual realms as well. In that DNA of all of these realms essentially are these sounds. These sounds not only created these realms, the material realms and the spiritual realms, they also maintain them. And so if we can understand them, we can understand literally life itself and learn how to, as I say, fully integrate with it ultimately, and with fate itself and all aspects of life, be it fate, be it time, whatever. Okay, and this is why I've been filming these videos and have gone into so much detail and spent so much time filming them and presenting them to you. It's because for me this is like a duty to share with you this knowledge if you do not already have access to it, because you've not divinated it almost yourself from the runes. If you've not acquired it yourself from the runes, it's my duty to share this knowledge with you, so that I can help raise you as well as myself towards the ultimate state that all as pagans should go towards, which we do, but as I say, consciously or subconsciously, we always go towards this point of oneness. We are all trying to achieve greatness. We are all trying to improve ourselves and others, and in doing so we actually are moving towards the state of oneness. We just perhaps don't know it. This is literally the realization of what you're going through, how to do it, and how to learn from it, and ultimately the end games and what it means. Okay, and so today what we're on is on the third aett of runes of the Elder Futhark script, which is the last 8 runes within the Elder Futhark script, okay, or alphabet, whatever you want to call it. And these all deal with your higher self. Okay, and so with the other 2 videos that I've done, I've associated with every single rune that I've presented to you a kind of feeling or emotion that you may feel within either your base self or your conscious self, because of course remember the first aett deals with your subconscious or your base self. Your second aett is supposed to essentially deal or represent your consciousness, but it also represents what I depicted to you as a theory, as the bridge towards higher consciousness. Okay, your own little bifrost that exists in your own mind between consciousness and higher consciousness. It represents that transition of going from consciousness to higher consciousness. But the third aett itself is completely associated with the higher consciousness, and so with this I have not associated any emotions, feelings, thoughts or whatever to these runes, because the higher consciousness is something that we cannot access directly. We must allow the flow of information to simply go in one direction. It comes down into us. It doesn't go up so to speak, and we can't integrate directly through it. It must go into our base self and then back into our self-consciousness when the knowledge comes down through our higher consciousness. And so as a result, there is no emotions or feelings that I certainly could give words to associate with what the higher consciousness represents, because I haven't got there yet. My higher consciousness, of course, is more expanded perhaps than most. I'm moving towards that process of expanding my mind to such a high level that it is getting there, that my consciousness and higher consciousness are beginning to, well, I'm not beginning to merge, I'm still many years away from that, but that I'm closer to that than perhaps other people who are simply starting the process. But the important thing is when I get there, I still don't believe, if I get there, if I manage to achieve a higher state of consciousness, I still don't think there'll be words that I can use to express the feelings that you can associate to these runes, because these are things that language is too limited to deal with. Okay, this is some really, high level stuff now. Basically, if you were taking paganism and it was a degree and not a faith, this is like getting your doctorate in it. The third aett of runes, and achieving the third aett of runes within your life, what they represent within your life, the successes that they represent, achieving them is like getting the very top honors that you can get within a doctorate, not alone a master's or a normal degree or A levels, GCSEs or anything like that. This really represents the highest that paganism, at least that I'm aware of at the moment, can go. Now I have no doubt there's possibly even further that you can go, but I'm not wise enough yet to perceive that. But this is the furthest that I can certainly see. Okay, and so without delaying any further, we're going to move on to the runes themselves. I'm going to tell you what each rune is, how it's traditionally pronounced, but the pronunciation isn't always necessarily important. But I'll try to tell you the original pronunciation as well as the common pronunciation in modern tongue, and then I will tell you what it traditionally meant when appropriate, but also what it really, what most importantly, what it means on a larger scale of things. So that's where we're going. So it's a similar format to the other videos I've done on the Out of Futhark script, but we're talking about some serious stuff now. So if you haven't already watched the other two videos, please do watch them. They are in a playlist associated with one another. So and it'll be called Rune Magic. It's also in Pagan Magic, I think. So if you go into either one of those playlists, they will be sequentially, hopefully, in order in those playlists. Okay, so that's where you'll be able to find them. So the first rune to consider out of the in the third aett, which, as I say, represents the highest self. This is the 17th rune of our alphabet or our script. Okay, and that is Tiwaz. I haven't engraved it yet, but that's what it would look like. Okay, Tiwaz. It's like an arrow. Okay, Tiwaz, the sort of, those of you well versed in paganism and with a curious mind may already have ventured forth and hazard a guess at what Tiwaz actually is. Tiwaz, if you listen to the word Tiwaz, okay, represents essentially Tyr, okay, the god Tyr, okay. It represents justice. It represents what Tyr really truly represents, sacrifice. Okay, because of course Tyr, the god Tyr, sacrificed his own sword hand to get Fenrir, the mighty beast himself, bound and locked in chains for pretty much the mass majority of time, until of course Ragnarok itself, where he gets free of his bindings. But Tyr sacrificed his hand for this. Okay, and really this is what this rune represents. It represents the sacrifice for where the sacrifice for other. That's what it truly represents, the sacrifice for other. So you've got self and other, and it's a sacrifice for other, the realization that there is no separation between self and other. the border of self and other, that is you and everything else around you, whether it be a person, a physical thing, or simply a moment in time, begins to dissolve. And these boundaries or these borders between self and other dissolve completely away, and there is no longer a duality between you, self, and other. And this is the sacrifice, ultimately. Learning, Tyr, the god Tyr, must have come to this realization that his sacrifice that he had to make was not a decision to make. It just simply had to be done, and it had to be done because self and other are the same, and he must suffer so that the other may prosper also. Okay, and simply that's what Tiraz represents, the realization that there is no border between self and other, that we are not separate entities as such. We are all linked in this life and destruction cycle, the creation and destruction cycle. We're all part of life itself, as are all the realms and everything within those realms. Okay. The next rune you'll be very lucky if you can see on camera, because it's not engraved yet and it's sharpied onto a very dark stone. But if you know the Bluetooth symbol, it's very similar to that. It's Pacano. It's a bee essentially. Okay, Pacano traditionally simply just represents the birch tree, but it can represent calming, healing, and birth. Okay, now after sacrifice for the other, okay, not only then do you sacrifice for the other, you now begin, as you move into Pacano, which is the traditional pronunciation. Sometimes it's pronounced Pacana, but Pacano is its true pronunciation. You now begin to nurture the other. So you've sacrificed for the other, and now you nurture the other. You yourself have experienced the dissolved boundary that exists between self and other. You understand there's no segregation between you and everything else around you. But now you begin to lift up others and help and aid them in dissolving their boundaries. And so as you pass through life, it is now at this point when you reach the state of Pacano that you not only understand that you are one with life, that there is no separation between you and every single element of life. As I say, every moment, every person, everything, every animal, anything physical and non-physical, you are one with it. Okay, physically and spiritually, you are one with everything. Okay, but now it's your time, as I said, to nurture the others and guide them and aid them and rise them up, rise their consciousness up, and allow them to see what you see, those dissolved boundaries, and to dissolve their boundaries for them, or help them come to the realization that you've come to. And this dissolving of boundaries and erasing of others within others is simply Pacano. It's a beautiful rune. Okay, it's and I love how it feeds off Tiraz. Those two runes together really represent to me what the god Tyr is about. When you understand these two runes and their interaction with one another, the story of how Tyr loses his hand, whichever way you hear it, there's different ways of telling the story within Nordic paganism, Celtic paganism, and there's multiple ways of telling the story within each of those ones. And I've not heard the Iberian paganism version of it, but regardless of whatever the story is, there's a sacrifice made by the god Tyr, and you can then, once you understand the runes of Tiraz and Pacano, the ones that I've just described, okay, you can understand the state of mind that he must have been in. He felt no fear, he felt no shame, he felt no worry or perhaps regret when Fenrir bit down. He felt nothing, because he was raising. He had already gone beyond this stage of realization, and he was simply sacrificing himself or part of himself so that others would be safe. He was nurturing those he cared for, and he knew that this sacrifice would buy him the time required to arise and raise and nurture the others that he loved towards the state where he had at least accomplished at this point in time. And it truly, you get into the mindset of the god tier truly when you understand these two runes in their combination. You understand the god tier so much more. And being Nordic pagan, obviously Tyr's a god that exists, but is not really commonly mentioned in Nordic paganism. So he's not very an important god to me, although I have great respect for him and always have done. But when you understand these runes, I've gained a love for him, a true love, like you would your kin, like one where you would make the sacrifice yourself for him. I understand the love, or at least the realize, as I said, that sense of realization that he must have had at that point when he sacrificed his hand. Obviously, in Celtic paganism, he's the king of the gods, and so he plays a much greater role. And so, for those of you who are Celtic pagan, I'm sure you would understand the beauty of these two runes, Tiraz and Pacano, to coming together in a much more beautiful manner than even myself. You can really, really connect with your king ultimately, and I give praise to your king, and I give praise to Tyr in Nordic paganism. Odin is my king, but I have the utmost love and respect for Tyr for what he did, and for the level of progress that he must have made to make that sacrifice. He must have been so far along the rune path at that point in time that he truly is a wise god. Okay, the next rune to discuss is let me just get it right, Awas. Okay, I'm not as well versed with the third aett yet. Okay, Awas. Okay, Awas. Okay, not to be confused with, and it looks like an M, there you go, you can see it, not to be confused with Ewas, which is on my middle finger there. Okay, so Awas, Ewas. Okay, so they're very, very similar pronunciations. That's why I was looking at my notes to make sure that I got it right. Awas means horse, and that's pretty much it. I don't like the other translations. I won't tell you them. I find them insulting. Okay, when you see witchcraft in pagan translations and stuff, it's like we wouldn't call our own witchcraft. It's stupid. I actually am annoyed about that. It makes me lose respect for some of the works that I've looked at here. The research. Anyway, Ewas. After the dissolving of the boundaries of other, as well as your own self, but of the other, after dissolving their boundaries, you and the other gain a bond between you. You become bound together, and this binding is formed of both trust and kinship. This trust and kinship binds you so strongly with the other that now you form a cohesive unity. You become essentially a singular entity in many respects. Yes, you may have two minds, if it, and all the rest of it, two consciousnesses, whatever. But regardless, you now, for all intents and purposes, have both come to realize that there is there is no duality, that there is just existence, and we are all part of it. And that fact that you nurtured and raised someone or something else into that state binds it to you, as I say, with this trust, this kinship, this love that you cannot even begin to understand until you reach that level. This true binding between oneself and other is this cohesive unity that we give the name Awas. Okay, we give it the name Awas. Okay, After that, we have the Rune of Manas. Okay, this represents mankind and partnership. And what's interesting is it actually is two, if I remember correctly, two Wunyo runes. Actually, I've got a picture of the Wunyo rune here. Yeah, it's two Wunyo runes actually facing one another, joined together. An interesting way to remember it. Okay, so it's two Wunyo runes joined together. Okay, and really, that helps you understand where Manas is coming from, because Manas is just like with Canas swelling Gabo into you fulfill an action for the very first time in the creational cycle and gain the joy of Wunyo, which is represented, as I say, almost in the rune itself. It's just like that, but it's just like with Suelo, where you get again another feeling of joy, ultimately through the paired actions of Perfro and Elraz. With Manas, you get a realization, which is just a synonymous term for joy. Joy is just simply a realization, or an epiphany, if you wish. You gain the realization that comes from having dissolved the boundaries of duality. Okay, you literally now begin to understand that duality, you fully understand that it is an illusion. It doesn't exist, and this simple realization that duality, that duality, or that separation between entities, does not exist within life. This realization gives a sense of joy that we call Manas, and this Manas, or this joy for Manas, comes directly from the creational process of joining two things together. That's the other way to experience it, but ultimately that's what you're doing when you dissolve the boundaries between yourself, around yourself even, and around something else, and you become bound through kinship and trust. You become so tightly bound together that you become this integrated, cohesive unity. This joining of two things into one, this development of oneness between two individual aspects, this is the joy of Manas. Following Manas, we have the rune of Laguz. Okay, Laguz. Okay. Now, Laguz normally represents water, or the flow of water. Okay, and let me just move some things around just in case. I don't know, I have a feeling my phone's going to go, and I haven't turned it off, so I just want to move my mouse over the pause button just in case. So Laguz is, as I say, typically represented by the flow of water, and it is, out of all of the traditional meanings of the runes, the most accurate meaning. It literally is just the flow of things. Laguz represents on a larger scale simply just the flow of that singular integrated process that we described, that was created through Pacano and Araz and realized through Manas. The flow of this singular process going through time and flowing through fate, that is Laguz, just simply flowing through life with whatever you've essentially integrated within life. It is at this point, the understanding that simply that, as I say, duality is an illusion, and understanding that illusion, that simply duality simply does not exist, is what allows you to flow through fate, perfectly synchronizing yourself with fate. So it's beyond the simply flowing with fate. You now flow with fate so effortlessly it's as if you are literally buoyant in water and you are literally just going with the flow of a river, and you're not resisting, you're not paddling water, you're not trying to direct yourself, you're not trying to fight the current or anything like that. You are literally just letting fate take you to wherever you're destined to go. Okay, and it's this flowing through time in perfect synchronization with fate itself that we give the name Laguz. So now you are flowing with not only self and other combined, but also with fate, and you are flowing with fate in complete synchronization. Okay. Now the next rune following Laguz is Angrist. Sometimes Angrist is how it's pronounced, but it's actually pronounced Angrist. But you know, the pronunciations, guys, come more into, you know, like the practice of Gauda magic, where maybe yes, you do have to get the pronunciations right. But Angrist, but if you're just studying the runes, you don't really need to know how to pronunciate them so much. You just need to understand what they mean. Okay. Now Angrist, okay, looking at it, what do you see? I'm just going to ask you that question first. Let's see what you come up with, because I can see a few things in there. Okay, and they give you clues as to what Angrist, the rune Angrist, sometimes pronounced Angrist, but as I say, Angrist represents. Well, first of all, it looks like a DNA helix for those of you with a scientific mind, doesn't it? But really, what it represents to me, when I look at it, at first, before I started, focusing on the runes, I did just see a DNA helix, and that was it. But now I see 2 Canas runes. Okay, so if you follow that there and there, that's a Rune of Chaos. If we flip it over, that's a Rune of Chaos. And Chaos is the rune of swelling, essentially. It's what swells the process of Rezu and stuff like that, and eventually, essentially, fulfills an action. Okay, so that's what I see it as, the two Canas runes joined together. But it represents traditionally sex, fertility, and conception. Okay, and it can actually represent also love and harmony. So there's a lot behind this, and hence why it's on a pink stone. Okay, because it's all to do with sex, love, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now you are one, literally, with life, but not only with life, but with fate. Every passing moment of your life from here on in, you are flowing with it and integrating with it completely effortlessly, and synchronizing with it completely effortlessly. You are no longer trying, essentially, to move through life. You are no longer feeling hardship like we did with Haralas, or anything like this. You're no longer feeling the need that comes from Haralas, that is represented with Laufey's. You'll never experience the despair of Isa ever again. Once you hit Angrist, okay, you are literally completely synchronized with life and fate, and that is what Angrist is, that perfect synchronization of life and fate. So Laguz is where you're beginning to flow through life, and you're beginning to synchronize with it. You're beginning to synchronize with fate, and you're beginning to realize where the duality is an illusion and it's completely dissolving away. That is the process of sort of, you're at the mouth of the top of the river at this point. But Angrist is when you've completely fallen into the river and you've just let yourself go into the flow. Literally, you're not just flowing with it, you've been flowing with it for a long time, and at this point you're at literally perfect synchronization between both life and fate, and that's what Angrist means. Now really, this next rune, if I can find it, there it is. Okay, Ophala is how most people pronounce it. Ophira is perhaps a better pronunciation, and it represents traditionally ancestry, inheritance, okay, but essentially it just really represents inheritance or inherited property, okay, and this is what it looks like. Ophura, okay, Ophura, let's get it there we go, Ophura, okay, or Ophala, doesn't really matter, but Ophura. I also have it on my little finger there as well, okay. Now this, again, it's that literal translation is actually very accurate to what it represents on your learning cycle, or your path, your fate path, as it would be described by some people, okay. Because this is, again, simply it's two things. It's a realization, again, like we've had before with oh god, there's so many of them like with Wunyo, Sorelu, Manas. I think I've got them all there, okay. Ophala is another state of, and Yeda. Is Yeda a state of, no, Yeda's not a state of realization, is it? Or is it? It is, actually. Sorry, Yeda. How have I forgotten Yeda every time? Anyway, well, it's not. No, forget that. It's not a state of realization. It's very similar, but it is a different thing. Okay. Now, Ophura is just like them. It's a state of realization, but it's something different because it's the last and final state of realization that you'll ever reach. It's where your mind and your wisdom has grown so much that you get more than just simple joy. You gain an added element to it, and we'll go into what that is after I've described it. So if you cast your mind back, as I say, and look at the joy of Wunyo, you look at the joy of Sorelu, and you look at the joy of Manas, you see these joys that you get through simply either creating or realizing or whatever, or dissolving boundaries and all this kind of stuff. If you look at that, you see a sort of literally a step-by-step process, cranking it up. The joy becomes more spiritual in its own essence. It gets bigger, it gets more significant, and it's joy stacked upon joy, stacked upon joy, and it's, or realization stacked upon realization, stacked upon realization, and you can see how all these epiphanies that you go through this learning pathway that the runes tell you, you can see how it opens the mind. And at this point, you have gone so far with Ophura that the realization that you gain, or the epiphany, the joy that you gain, is simply one that you gain from a fully universal perspective. So you're not sort of looking at it from it here, you're not looking at it from here, you're not feeling it here. You are from a fully universal perspective. You are seeing it literally as if you've taken a backward step and gone back 100 million light years, and you're just looking at everything in completeness. And it's this, you can imagine the joy of that you would get from suddenly thinking, how childish were those thoughts that I once had? How petty was that I used to feel those kind of things? You have gone beyond that. And you've gained this universal perspective because you've gone through creation again and again and again. You've gone through destruction an equal number of times. You've both seen things come to life or things occur. You've seen the passing of moments in time, and you've seen them dissolve away. You've seen things turn to dust. You've seen things die. You've seen what entropy ultimately does. You've then accepted this, progressed and dissolved the boundaries between not only yourself and around yourself, so that you can integrate with the universe and flow with it all, but you've also raised others with you and dissolved their boundaries at the same time. In doing so, then, you are able to simply flow and integrate through time in the universe, and through all the realities. You are able to flow and integrate with perfect synchronicity. And it is this process that is called, or this state at which you reach, which is called Ophura, or Ophala, okay? Ophura, okay? And in many respects, I would believe, and I would take it as a title. If I ever reach that, it's a title, okay? Because it's a true achievement. It's the greatest achievement one could ever make, to get to that state where your mind is just so expanded, okay, and so connected with the higher realms. And what you get as an additional bonus for reaching this state of joy, or this state of realization, essentially, is you gain a spiritual inheritance ultimately. Because you pass into this level which is so high, you gain a spiritual inheritance, which is important because that leads on to the next room. And you leave behind you, or the reason you have a spiritual inheritance is because you leave behind you, as you progress further into the next room, which would be almost seamless. I can't imagine there's any real sort of border between Ophura and the next room, which is Dagas. I can't see any boundaries or borders or any sort of things that you need to do to get there. Once you've reached Ophura, you're there, you know. It's only a matter of time until you slip into the next rune of Dagas, okay? But you leave behind you, as a result, a legacy, a spiritual legacy, a legacy which hopefully will allow others to learn, will hopefully allow others to teach, and to raise others with themselves and achieve the same things you have. This is Ophura, leaving behind a legacy of, once you've reached that full spiritual enlightenment, if you wish, leaving behind a legacy that others can follow. Okay? And simply spoken, if you wish to give literally a single sentence to describe what Ophura means, it is the process of moving into oneness. That's its definition, the process of moving into oneness, but through the realization of all those joys that you've gone through, and all those hardships also, because from hardship does come joy, you know. And as I say, it's the moving on into oneness, which we call essentially Dagas. Dagas is this rune here, okay. Dagas is sometimes it represents dawn. It can mean both the conclusion of something, but also the beginning of something. Beautifully put, it can be literally translated into the light of day. Okay, and Dagas is simply the process of moving, or being able to move into the next macro cycle. You have oneness with the current reality that you are existing within, and are now, as a result, able to move into the next macro cycle. So Dagas, but once you've got, as I say, Ophura, that's it. You can't progress any further. And once you reach that state, it's just a matter of time. All you got to do is wait for Ragnarok, for when reality is destroyed. But because you have achieved so much oneness, so much knowledge of yourself and everything else around you, and not just knowledge, understanding, and you've not just gained the knowledge and understanding, you've integrated that in knowledge and understanding into yourself to create wisdom beyond anything, and you have flooded yourself so much with that wisdom that your base self has moved upwards, has pushed your consciousness into your higher consciousness. Maybe even your base consciousness has even reached your higher consciousness. You have become one with the spiritual realms, with the higher realms, so to speak, and you are so high that when Ragnarok comes, in essence, this is my belief, you are so at one with reality that you will simply pass on to the next macro cycle. It explains why, you know, it is prophesized, if you wish, that when Ragnarok comes, there will be a few men, a few gods here and there that will survive Ragnarok and will pass forwards into the next reality. These individuals were probably people who had reached the stage of, well, the stage of a Fura, and were as a result ready for the stage of Dagas, the simple movement of moving into the next macro cycle, into the next reality. If we look at those who will supposedly survive Ragnarok, I mean, you have a couple of Force sons, I believe it is. You have 2 humans, I think it is, 2 men, about a man and woman, I believe it is, or at least a handful. But one of the most prominent, in fact, actually, I would say the most prominent of gods or goddesses that moves on is Freya herself, the goddess of magic, the ultimate manipulator of fates, the creator of Seder magic, and you know, a goddess who, if anyone's interpreted these stones, you would expect it possibly to be her. You would also, in some ways, expect Odin to have progressed, because he was seen as the wisest of the gods. But I believe that he was capable and is capable, and perhaps is capable of moving into Dagas. But I think he's a typical stubborn Viking in this sense, that he wants to die, he wants to fight and have his death on the battlefield. Yes, he may be able to progress, but he doesn't need to. He wants to fight and die, and that's it, because that is his destiny, you know. And his destiny is to, you know, or, you know, he simply, you could argue that he simply hinders himself, because when he gains, up to the point of when he gains foresight, when he sacrifices his right eye for foresight at the Wall of Erd to the Nords, okay, at the base of Yggdrasil, okay, he ultimately, before that point, is this ultimate seeker of knowledge. He's just has a unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and not only does he have a thirst for knowledge, but he understands what he takes in. He pursues it completely and absolutely, travels the lands, experiences the life of the king of the gods, right down to the paupers of humans. You know, he experiences every spectrum, every aspect of life that he can experience. He experiences, and this is why he's often, you know, the god of travelers, because he really does, you know, travel around and experience life. But when he gains foresight, he does see his death at the jaws. I was about to say the hands, but it's more like the jaws of Fenrir, and he sees Ragnarok and the ultimate destruction that it brings. And even though perhaps he always knew it, he becomes slightly obsessed. I think slightly obsessed is a bit of an understatement, really. He becomes totally involved in the prevention of Ragnarok, and ultimately I can see why he did this. It wasn't a weakness or flaw in character, although one could argue that's, for example, it's not a character flaw in any way whatsoever. It's in the same way that Tyr sacrificed his hand for the betterment of his people, to bind Fenrir until Ragnarok, the day of Ragnarok, because he was simply too dangerous to let live freely at this point in time. That realization that you must sometimes sacrifice oneself. I think that Odin, being ultimately the wisest of the gods, realized that he had to sacrifice himself ultimately, so that at least some things survive. I don't believe that if he could pass through into another reality, but I, you know, as I say, this, and the reason as such is not necessarily because of an impossibility, but it's simply because he is king of the gods, right? He is king of the gods, and not only king of the gods, king of men, and the king of everything, basically, apart from that of his enemies. Okay, and even amongst them, he is respected and feared. Okay, and as a result, is it not a king's duty to serve his people, not the other way round? Okay, that's what a wise man would say. You know, that the people do not serve the people do serve the king, but ultimately, when the shit hits the fan, it's the king who serves the people. Okay, and I think that's what he understood. He had enough wisdom to pass into Dagas. He was well within that realms, probably long before anyone else, long before he gained foresight. But when he gained this foresight, he gained really responsibility for his people. He always had it, but he became his obsession, the responsibility to ensure that as many of his people are prepared for the war that is going to come, that his death is going to come, but he'll do everything possible to prevent it, or well, not to necessarily prevent it, but to slow it down and to make it as hard as possible and to take down as many people as he can in the war that will one day come. So, you know, I actually admire Odin. I admire Odin because I see that he has the wisdom to pass on to the next reality. He has the wisdom to survive Ragnarok, but he also has the wisdom to see that it's not always about survival. It's not about necessarily passing on to the next reality. Sometimes you just simply have to perform your duty, and it was his duty as king to protect and to die for his people in many respects. This is how I see it anyway. And I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and I hope you have thoughts on it too. I hope you've enjoyed the whole series of the 3 videos and any of the other videos associated with it. Where we're going from here is we're not just going to be focusing on the runes as a whole now. We're actually going to be focusing on I'll do a few videos on how I make these, or what I'll do. Well, what I'm going to do, I've decided, is I'm going to do videos where I tell you a little bit about the rune. I tell you what it can be used in different spells and different spell crafts, like how is it used in Gauda magic, how is it used in Sailor magic, or how can it be used in other forms of magic, for example. And I will tell you, you know, just little basic facts about it, and then sort of in between those kind of facts, just to break it up, I'll have a little sort of comedy video of me sort of sped up making the runes, engraving them, painting them, so on and so forth. And I may then end the video with further insights that I have developed since obviously creating the runes, and up to that point, you know, what I may get increase in knowledge up to that point. So obviously we wish to share that with you. So other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped, and I hope it helps you find Dagas, I suppose. Okay, thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure having you listen to me, those that do, and I welcome all comments, good or bad. I welcome all comments. Thank you.